The 2025 German election is a strange case in which literally everybody lost. Maybe you could say Die Linke marginally won, but by and large, all the political parties lost, the German people lost, and while it seems like the EU managed to claw a win out of this one, it's a Pyrrhic victory at best. It's kind of a strange scenario, but if you were going to have an election in a country where everybody loses, I think Germany would be one of the obvious picks for that happening. Okay, so let's go through the results. So we have Friedrich Merz and the CDU-CSU. So they theoretically won the election because they got the most seats and they got the highest percentage of the vote. Now at 28.5%, which is the second worst vote total they've ever had. Now, the CDU is one of the most successful parties in history. They dominated post-war Germany. If we go back and look at what they were getting under Merkel, like they were getting well into the 30s. They got 40% in an election. They were pretty consistently above 30. And if you go back even further to like the 80s and stuff, it was uncommon for them to get less than 40% of the vote. And now they can like barely scrape, they can't even scrape 30%. So that's a big L right there. I think the only worst result they had was actually the last election. That was an even bigger disaster, in which they went below 25% of the vote. But keep in mind, this was them going up against Olaf Scholz. Just think about that for a minute. They could barely scrape a win against Olaf Scholz. Like the lamest, most pathetic, least respected, least liked world leader. And that was the best that they could come up with was 28% of the vote. So that was a mess. We'll get to the AfD in a second. The SPD got the worst result since 1887. It might be, I think they said somewhere that it's comparable to what they got in 1933 when Hitler was on the ballot. But yeah, so they got reduced to 16% of the vote. They got completely and totally felt it. So that was a loss. The Greens took a hit. I guess you could say that the Greens lost the least, maybe, of the people who lost. They lost a number of seats. They lost some of the vote share, but they weren't decimated like the SPD was. Die Linke was really the only success story in this, but they only managed like 9%. And because of the way the election results came out, there's no hope of them forming a coalition. And the FDP just got completely destroyed, and they're gone from the German parliament. And this brings us to the interesting case of the BSW, the Sarah Vaughan Party. Let me just go down. So to get into the German parliament, you need 5% of the vote. And it's kind of interesting because the Sarah Vaughan Alliance got 4.97% of the vote. That seems very, very close to 5% of the vote. This is Germany. As we all know, Germany is a country that's known to be a free, liberal, democratic society that doesn't embrace censorship or disqualifying election candidates or running shenanigans. So there's no chance that was that there was anything that happened. However, there was, if we go down and take a look at this. Let's see here. There was a bunch of problems with some of the mail-in ballots. It's funny how that always seems to be the case. There was problems with the overseas mail-in ballots. Given that they only needed like 13,000, I would imagine that might have put them over the top. But that's really interesting that the other anti-system party got barred from parliament by an incredibly small amount of votes, and then a whole bunch of overseas votes got lost. It's almost like what happened with Moldova. So I was looking into a bit more what happened in Moldova. So in Moldova, they did not allow the votes of Moldovans living in Russia, of which there is a lot, to be counted, to my understanding, but they did allow the votes of Moldovans in the EU to be counted. Now, the kind of Moldovans who live in Russia would probably vote a certain way, but in a very close election, those votes just, I don't know, they didn't come in. They mysteriously vanished. Let's just take a field trip. I forget if I don't think it was the presidential election, but it was the EU membership election. Like it came down to 10,000 votes, and I think a bunch of votes didn't wind up happening. So that's interesting. But like I said, there's no way that that could have happened in Germany. Now I don't know how much of a threat to the system the BSW is. It is worth saying though that if the BSW had gotten into parliament, you would have had to have a three coalition party. I believe that the CDU and SPD would not be able to form a government on their own. They would have had to bring in the Greens, and the CSU, who is the Bavarian branch of the CDU, I think said they aren't going to form an alliance with the Greens. So it would have been even a bigger shit show than it was. So it's very fortunate that that 0.3% of the vote didn't come in. Um, Once again, funny how that works. So the coalition that we're left with is the SPD, who did the worst that they've done in like 130 years, and the CDU, who's had their second worst results since they were formed. And that's who's going to lead government. Two parties who did basically the worst that they've ever done, or close to the worst they've ever done. Once again, I mean, the CDU did worse last time, but that was kind of to be expected. That was after the Merkel years. People were mad about Merkel. People were mad about a lot of stuff that was going on. I don't really consider it as big a like an issue if you've been in power for like 16 years and then or 12 years or however long it was, and then you get badly beaten when you're the governing party. That's per normal. But the fact that they couldn't do better is yeah. So it kind of works like this. So previously we had the traffic light coalition of SPD, Green, and FDP. To reward the Schultz and his party for sucking so hard that they fell to like 100-year low, they're going to get to stay in government. We're going to have a grand coalition of Merz and Schultz, or whoever they're going to replace him with. So the two losers are going to enter into coalition. The Greens, I don't know what they're going to do. The Link is irrelevant. And that brings us to the AfD. Now, to a lot of people, this might seem like a win. And I guess in a sense it is. You had a right-wing nationalist party that managed to get 20% of the vote. They came in second place. They managed to beat the SPD. But I'm actually going to have to be the doomer for once and say it's a loss. That's all they could get. That's all they could do against Olaf Scholz and company, who have destroyed the German economy. These are the people who shut down the nuclear plants and switched Germany back to coal power. These are the people who were okay with Ukraine blowing up Nord Stream. These are the guys who, like, Scholz got humiliated in every country he went to. Energy prices are through the roof. The economy's in recession. The whole thing was just a complete and total shit show, and they could barely manage to get 20% of the vote. So if you look at it, people like, let's see, what percentage of the population voted for like the Uniparty in one form or another, and I'm going to include Die Linke in the Uniparty. Okay, so we have 23 plus 16 plus 12 plus 9 plus 6 plus 4. Yeah, so if you add up all these about 75% of Germans voted for System Party, like part of the Uniparty, and 25% voted for the AfD or the BSW. So, I mean, that's not enough. That's not a win. That's not even the case like what you have in France. where if it was only the actual French people voting, the National Front would probably win. It doesn't matter if you maybe if you only include Germans, like actual Germans, that would go up to 25% or something like that. But it's not nearly enough. It's not like it's not gonna do anything to the system really. Any kind of fundamental change. And I get that there's massive issues. They've almost been banned a number of times. They've experienced extreme censorship. Things have been very, very rough for the AfD as they're trying to get themselves together. But they only got 20%, and the BSW only got 5%. So I think at a certain point you have to acknowledge that that's what the German people want. Like they want Mertz, they want Schultz, they want Barabbas. Is basically who they want. They want these losers to stick around. They're going to keep giving them mandates because the AfD, with its lesbian leader who's in a relationship with like a half Indian woman or something, is the new Hitler. And they would rather let their country be overrun by illegal by immigrants, let their daughters get raped, let their economy collapse, let their pipelines get blown up, demilitarize their country, pick a fight with Russia and the United States, and all the other shitty things that have been happening. They would rather that happen than somebody accuse them of being racist. Um, and that is what the German people are like. And I say this as a Canadian, and Canada is even worse than Germany. A party like the AfD couldn't even get like 5% in Canada, let alone 20%. There's at least some people in Germany who don't like what's going on. It's clearly not a majority of the population. But I mean, at the end of the day, and this is kind of the question, do people have the government that they deserve? Do people have the government they vote for? And I mean, you can go on about the media bias and people don't know things and the political system and the elect, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, there is the question, if the German people wanted something different, would they have something different? And I don't really know the answer to that. But here we are. Now, this coalition of losers, these two weak parties, is just going to limp along now. Who knows how it's going to go, how long it's going to go on, but they're just going to limp along for the next, I don't know, 4 years or something. Then we'll have another election, and maybe we'll have the same coalition again, but maybe the Greens or the FDP will come in. The AfD will get like 22% of the vote, maybe, and that's just kind of what's going to happen. I think Germany is in a really bad place. I actually have more hope for the UK at this point, because the UK has no pressure valve whatsoever. Reform is a joke. It's not even like a fake like nationalist party. It's just garbage. So I could see that politically collapsing sooner than Germany. I just think Germany is going to limp along. Also, the German people, I think, are just so resistant for a number of different reasons to any kind of serious change that they will keep going. And I don't know what else to say, really. It was an election where somehow everybody lost. And that is insane. That is fascinating, to be honest. Anyways, guys, there's the black pill, and I'll talk to you later.